Hello and welcome to this live episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us here today at Strathclyde Union. It's great to see so many of you. The event is part of our brand new Inspiring Entrepreneurs podcast series. The series will focus on skills that make students more employable, covering everything from graduate recruitment to building confidence and the power of entrepreneurial thinking. That focus feels more important than ever because the job market is tough right now. Youth unemployment in Scotland is sitting at 11% higher than the EU average. And on top of that, the World Economic Forum predicts that 44% of the global workforce will need reskilling within the next 5 years. So success isn't just about technical knowledge anymore, it's about adaptability, resilience, and entrepreneurial skills that help you to stand out. So that's what today's discussion is about. Our panel will be sharing practical insights on what employers really value, the mindsets that set graduates apart, and how you can use your time at Strathclyde and the support of Strathclyde Inspire to build the skills and the networks that you need to succeed. We've got a brilliant panel with us today, so let's dive in. If we could just begin by working our way along and introducing yourselves, that would be great.
Hello, my name's Camrie. I'm the careers consultant for our Faculty of Engineering, but I work within the Careers and Employability Service here at Strathclyde.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I'm the Entrepreneurship and Employability Lead, and I work for both the Careers and Employability Service and Strathclyde Inspire.
Hi, I am Lucrezia Casulli. I am an associate professor in entrepreneurship and co-author of the book Entrepreneurial Thinking, Mindset in Action.
Hi everyone, nice to see you today. I am an employee of University of Strathclyde spin-out, Entropist, and I used to be Inspire ambassador.
And your name?
Galina. Thank you.
And I'm Katie McNair. I'm Marketing and Communications Manager at Inspire. So, a couple of quick openers. We'll start with you, Camrie. From a careers perspective, when you see a graduate CV, what's the first thing that either impresses you or really puts you off?
I think the first thing that impresses me is if it's clean, clear and well put together. I'm quite a stickler for things being aesthetically pleasing, and I think it doesn't take a lot to make it work. So things like, all your bullet points are aligned, or it's, there's enough white space around. And the first thing that puts me off, I think, is a really inauthentic summary at the top.
Okay.
When somebody says that all that gets them out in bed in the morning is, thinking about wastewater treatment. We know that's not true. Nobody's asking you to think that. So I think, people feeling like a genuine person has written it is a real positive.
Any tips for how to get that feeling that a genuine person has written it?
I think really have a conversation with a person about what you would say on that and actually talk it through and say it out loud, because then it's your words. Whereas sometimes when we sit down to just type, ChatGPT looks awfully appealing and it's not us. And I think, I explain it to people as it's sort of like when you meet somebody for the first time and you're shaking their hand and they get an impression of you. That's what you're trying to do with that part of a CV. So make it you.
Yeah.
So I think have a conversation with somebody and then listen back to what you said and go, okay, that's how I'll write it.
I think that's a really useful piece of advice. I used to work as a journalist, and I found when I was interviewing people, as soon as you put a recording device near them or you ask them to give you answers written to questions, it didn't sound real anymore.
Yeah.
Even though they were trying to give real answers, because people try to formalize what they're saying, they try to make it sound impressive, and it just ends up sounding wooden and strange. So the conversation thing, I think, is a really, really great tip. Thank you. Thomas, so you lead on entrepreneurship and employability. What mistake do you think students should avoid when it comes to making the most of their studying experience, and how can they make sure they graduate with the skills they need to be employable in the current landscape?
I think the biggest mistake that, even just retrospectively looking at my own experiences in higher education and having spoken to and getting to know so many fantastic students through my 2 years so far here, is getting really wrapped up on what grade they're going to get for every single assignment and overly stressing over the small stuff, over all the small details. For me, it's recognizing and appreciating the privilege of being in higher education and having the bandwidth and the time that you do get to do new things, meet new people, take on new experiences, go new places. For me, I boil it down to the concept of not entrepreneurial, of opportunity cost. It's that, okay, if you reduce your effort in your studies by 5%, is that going to translate to a 5% drop in your marks? Potentially not. But what could you do with that extra 5% bandwidth? What experiences could you have, such as taking part in the Exploring Entrepreneurship Challenge, getting involved in a club or society, going on a bit of work experience or an internship, even just turning up to networking events, like taking part in the great experiences through the Careers Employability service. There's so much you can do by giving up just a very small fraction of time. And having been someone that's a great procrastinator, I know fine well that I didn't use 100% of the time that I assigned to working on coursework, to actually working on coursework. So it's that clearly letting my primary school education experience come out on me. It's that Dr. Seuss quote of "Don't forget to be tactful and tact, and remember life's one great balancing act." It's that knowing where and when to prioritize what. So just, take advantage of what's in front of you.
I think that's so very useful. And the good news is that the people who are here today are kind of already doing that. And the people who are listening in, you're already following this advice. You already understand that, yes, there's your marks, there's your degree program. That's why you come here. It's not the only thing that you can gain from this experience. So definitely see what's out there and get involved. It's an absolutely fabulous environment for you to find the contacts and the knowledge outside of your degree program that are really going to help you in the future. Okay, so talking about building skills and talking about building confidence, I'm going to turn to you, Etzia, now. So you've co-authored Entrepreneurial Thinking, Mindset and Action. So what is entrepreneurial thinking for anyone who doesn't know? And why do you think that that is a key to help students find success?
So let me start by what entrepreneurial thinking is not. Because many people, when they come into the programs that we run, think that entrepreneurial thinking is just about starting new ventures. And it's that too, but it's way, way more than that. Entrepreneurial thinking, it's an attitude, it's a way of thinking that is conducive to behaviors that create value. Now, value is different than creating ventures. Value can be many things, and it can be making society better, making your neighborhood better, making your own working life better. Value can be created for ourselves, for our families, for our employer, for society. An example of value creation is entrepreneurship, when we create something new for our employer. So value is the key to me, to entrepreneurial mindset, is what do we do with it? And of course, what is it that allows us to create value? You mentioned some earlier: resilience, cognitive agility, a learning orientation, the ability to change and turn depending on what's required in the situation, and a get up and go attitude, just try things out and not be afraid to fail. I think you have a specific one on failure. Failure is a big thing for me. We expect to be good at things straight away, and that sets us up for lack of success. I think we need to know that anything worth achieving requires effort. Talent is by the by, but effort is what conquers all. And I think that's the biggest thing that we want to stress through the book. So through the book, we talk about practice and effort, and even effort in mastering an entrepreneurial mindset. We are not all born resilient. We are not all born with this growth mindset. We sometimes take criticisms very personal, and going beyond that and being able to say, right, what's going to help me to improve on what I've been told? Let's focus on that. Let's not focus on my ego feeling bruised right now. I think that's what we need to master.
I think that's so true. I can relate to so much that you're saying. And I don't know if it's the same for anyone right now who's a student, but certainly when I was at school, it was all about your grades. You've got to get the best mark possible. And if you're not getting that, you're not going to get to university. And if you're not going to get to university, you're not going to get the job. So already it's all about don't fail. You cannot fail, because then you've already fallen off the track that you need to be on. And so it can be so hard to make that shift in understanding. And I think it took me a very long time to realize that actually failure is not a problem. It's actually a very useful thing, as long as you pay attention to it and then react to it and respond to it, rather than respond to it in that way of, oh no, it's over. I'm trying to think of a way of not swearing here. I've mucked this up.
Yeah.
And now I can't get back from it. Well, that's not the case at all.
No.
But no one explained that to me for a very long time.
I think a great colleague of mine says failure is not final. And that's a big thing for me.
definitely. Galina, so you have recently navigated the journey from Strathclyde student to gainful employment, and that can be quite a journey for many people. So what advice can you offer Strathclyders who are thinking about what steps to take while they study to improve the chances of career success?
I think it's a very important question because it's very important to start thinking beforehand, before you graduate. And I think actually at some point you need to take a step back because, as was mentioned before so many times, we can get so caught up in just chasing these grades and the best academic experience that we can actually forget what success means to us. So what are our values and whether they aligned with what we want to do for work or whether they disaligned, because you'll graduate, you'll get a job, but let's say you work 5, 10, 15 years and then you look back and you think, yes, I have a successful career, but I actually don't like what I'm doing. So I think it's very important to think what success means to you. Is it a big payout with bonuses? Is it building something of your own, being an entrepreneur? Or is it building communities and helping local networks? So just think what will make you happy. And I think this is a success to you. And start from there. And then also I would suggest to attend as many career and industry events as possible, because this is actually the place where you're going to meet people with the experience in the field that you're interested in. And you can also build a network which will help you to navigate the career market. And maybe you'll get some job opportunities from people you already know. Because the more intentional you are in your career journey, I think the better it is, because you actually, you know the industry, you know what are the challenges that people want to be solved, you know what are the values, and you can actually think what you can do to bring all of this into your future role, and that's how you become successful.
One thing I noticed about interacting with you, because for anyone who doesn't know, Galina she took part in the Exploring Entrepreneurship Challenge while she was a student. Then she became an Inspire ambassador, and we had various conversations. She would come and help me out with creating content for our social media channels. And I always found when talking to you, you weren't afraid to ask questions, you weren't afraid to make suggestions, and it just meant that you were using that network that you already had started to build up for yourself, and you were looking for opportunities within that. You were very proactive in seeking opportunities, because yes, you might get a no, but if you don't ask, you're definitely not getting a yes. And you then went on to take up an internship opportunity, and that has resulted in a really good story for you. So definitely being willing to be proactive, I could see that from the start with you. Can you talk about what projects or societies or experiences that helped you to build that kind of mindset?
Yeah, thank you so much for these nice words, first of all. And then I would say I've been a part of multiple student societies, but the absolute highlight happened to be the Exploring Entrepreneurship Challenge, because that's where you taught us that failure is not the end. It's about the journey, and it's about gaining this resilience. And it's just, I think having a positive mindset is actually a skill which is so underrated, and it's a big thing that you taught us. So for example, we didn't win, we were a runner-up, but I still got the best and the most out of the experience. And I think oftentimes it's about the perspective. Even if you don't get the prize, you get the skills. In the Exploring Entrepreneurship Challenge, it was about strategic thinking. You helped us to develop this long-term vision of what steps can we take and plan now to potentially create a successful venture. And then also a very important skill was communicating your ideas, because you can be so great in your field and you can be such a big expert, but if you can't present your ideas and you can't speak in the same language as your audience, then no matter what you're saying, it's not going to be appreciated. So I think it's also a very important skill for the CV. Everything that you're writing down in your CV should be super relevant to the role you're applying for, or any project you are doing. You can be passionate about so many things, but it's very important to narrow down sometimes and choose the most important things you want to communicate.
Thank you so much. I feel like we're learning so much. We've had a little bit from everyone, which I've just noticed as well, that you happen to be sitting in the right order for my questions. Makes it look like I planned this out amazingly.
Well done.
Yeah. Let's go back to Camrie. So what's the biggest misconception that you think students have about what employers really are looking for?
I think I'll go twofold. I think number one, thinking that if I got the best grade, I'll be the most attractive candidate. And I was using these stats because they were the most up to date. But, most employers ask effectively for a C or above, a 2 or above for an undergraduate. If you've got a master's, that supersedes it. And so that isn't setting you apart, because 78% of graduates get a 2-1 or above. 30% get a first. So actually, it's everything else that's going to set you apart. But I think what I tend to say to people on that side of it is, they're not hiring you and expecting you to be the full package yet. You are being hired on your potential. And so it's okay that your best example of being assertive and proactive isn't in a HR department. It's, working in a shop or wherever it is. If I look back on my life, I think that's definitely where I learned most of my kind of key skills. And they don't care where. And in some ways, the more interesting the places you've developed those skills, that might be what sets you apart in the end. It's amazing when you speak to people that have been successful in really competitive industries that, notoriously thousands of people apply for and few people get. And most of the time it comes down to, we spoke about the fact that, I went touring around so-and-so playing golf, or I was part of this team and I met these people, or, and I think everybody has that, because we all leave university, we've all been here for the same amount of time. It might feel different for some of us. But I think, as Thomas said earlier, where can you give 5%? Because the likelihood is you can give 5% and still get your 2-1. So that's taken care of. What else can you be doing? And it doesn't have to feel laborious or like a chore. Actually, and again, as Glenn was saying, you don't want to end up in a job you don't enjoy. So taking time to figure out what you enjoy. I know when I went to university, I grew up in a tiny village and then even went to high school in a very small town. And then I moved to Manchester, which was like felt bigger than anywhere I'd been before. There was so much more. I didn't know that there were nightclubs that played good music until I left to where I grew up. So I think, it doesn't have to be something, you don't have to be doing a coding certificate or something that feels very boring and laborious to you. Explore something that probably is what's going to set you apart, but also you're going to know yourself. And I think being self-aware is one of the most attractive things in a candidate, because if you know where your weaknesses are, you can take accountability and do something about them. And you don't need a manager to take time to point that out. So knowing where your weaknesses are is incredibly attractive, I think, in recruitment, because again, you're willing to work on your potential.
Yeah.
You go, I think this is where I'm heading, and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to give it a go. And I think that's probably the most attractive thing. They're not expecting you to be experts.
I wonder how many people listening or how many people here today are going to find that quite a relief and quite freeing. I think I certainly would have as a student. So we can all just take a deep breath after that, I think.
Yeah.
Thomas, employers talk about resilience and collaboration as being some soft skills that they particularly welcome. How can students go about showing that they have these skills? Can you give some examples?
Absolutely. I think there's almost a two-part answer to that. Firstly, it's how do you communicate any kind of experience or competency or ability or skill set, however you want to frame it. And for me, it's all about storytelling. It's all about that narrative and letting the person you're speaking to feel like they were there with you and how you're telling it. I think that the art of storytelling and when you're having that conversationally, whether that be in a job interview or even just in terms of building your network and meeting new people, is an incredibly important skill. And I think that's, if you have that under your belt, you'll find the second part of my answer that much easier. So I would really advocate for anyone to find an opportunity to go and develop that, whether that be joining an acting society or even just amateur dramatics or stand-up comedy or whatever the case may be. Opportunities to develop that skill are absolutely invaluable. But specific to collaboration and resilience, it's all about impact. It's not just I failed once. congratulations, most of us have failed many times in the day before it's even lunchtime. You know, like failure is a thing that happens. It's the so what. So what is an incredibly important part, especially when it comes to collaboration and resilience. Yes, you might have been part of a fantastic team that really made you enjoy that class. So what? What that collaborative experience, what impact did that have on what you as a team were able to achieve, or what did that allow you to bring forward into the next collaborative experience you had? And with that resilience, we often, anyone that's ever worked with me on anything about resilience, know that I hark on about the difference between resilience and persistence. And it's that, yeah, okay, you failed. So what? Did you get up and try and do the exact same thing over and over again? Because it is the definition of insanity to do the exact same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Show that you're resilient. What did you learn from that failure that allowed you to pivot, to change, to grow, and do something slightly different until you get to that place that you're ultimately trying to get to, or until you realize that the actual destination you wanted to get to all along was something slightly different, and you've learned and grown from that. If you can show that self-awareness, that self-actualization, then that so what will become natural as you give that answer. So yeah, I think that's my storytelling and so what.
You have just changed my notion of resilience versus persistence. I think that's so useful, that idea of it doesn't actually necessarily mean you have to work harder or push further. It's about approaching it, having learned from that failure or from whatever you've been experiencing before that. I think that's so very useful. So thank you for that. Ezia, thinking about future-ready graduates, can you talk to me about what future-ready means to you? And you have helped create a module that we run at the university called Exploring Entrepreneurial Thinking. Can you talk about how that can help students gain this ability to be future-ready?
Yep. Future-ready, what does that mean? I start from there. Employers either are going to fail and you're not going to have a job. And if they succeed, it's because they are able to adapt. So if your employers are going to adapt to an ever-changing world where technology is changing fast, innovation is coming in fast, that means that the job you're signing up to is going to change within the first year probably that you're there, and it will continue to change. And what that then means is that the employer would like graduates for you to be able to go along with that, all the changes that are going to come. Now, that can be exciting for some, but that brings with it a lot of uncertainty. And we talk a lot about uncertainty and ambiguity in the book. And for me, for us as authors of that book, being comfortable with uncertainty is key in new graduates. All too often we see graduates that want things to be just very clear and know exactly where they stand and know exactly what the deal is. The reality is, in today's employment, that's not going to happen. And we need to all be comfortable with not knowing exactly what's happening, where we are heading. We need to be prepared to put effort into something, and then we need to pivot next day, because that's the nature of uncertain work. And that's fine. We also need to be prepared to work with people who are very different from us. So talking about collaboration, everybody talks about collaboration. And this always makes me smile, because when you think about collaboration, you picture this lovely group of people sitting together, sharing a cup of coffee, and we're all, look a bit the same, and we speak a bit the same, and we're all got there on time. And then when you get true teamwork, what you're getting is people that come from very different cultures, make very different assumptions about each other. Some are very on time, some will be late, some will forget they needed to be there. Some will be last minuters, some will plan their work and do their work ahead. And then what we get are students go, I hate my team, I don't want to do my group work. But that's the reality of it. So that's where in the module that builds on the book, we talk about empathy and perspective taking. It's very important to understand that different people will work differently from us. Not because they're mean or because they're wrong and we're right, but simply because we are all very different. And the best ideas, the most innovative solutions come from putting together people that are very different. So we need to be comfortable with that, comfortable with people not respecting whatever rules we think we have set without making them explicit. And what that then is required is communication. And good communication is about unpacking unspoken assumptions. What do you assume that we're going to do? How do you assume we're going to work together? When do you think you're going to plan to work on this bit of the work? And if the other person has a different time schedule, that's okay. So it's about all of that. It's about communication, empathy towards others. People are not trying to be mean. They're just different from us. And that's fine. We have a tendency as human beings to assume that our way is the right way. And we need to get over that. So yes, in the module, we cover all of these concepts and we give some examples through case studies. We also give some examples of what different forms of value creation is, so that we can see that, oh, yes, I've done something like that. I've helped children, raise funds for a particular new machinery or whatever in a hospital. This is value creation. That's what employers want. And employers also want people who are going to participate in co-creation of solutions, not just wait to be told what's happening next.
One thing I'm definitely taking from what you're saying is this idea of, yes, the future is uncertain. We cannot know what it's going to be like. Some things in it remain the same, which is we're going to have to work with other people. We're going to have to be adaptable to whatever is coming up. And so prioritizing those skills rather than technical knowledge, for example, might be the longer term better bets. I think that's one of the reasons why. So exploring entrepreneurial thinking, for anyone who isn't familiar with this module, it's created by academics in the business school, but it's available to students across the university. We wanted it to be available to all faculties because we think these skills are useful far beyond venture creation, as you brought up at the start, that being entrepreneurial doesn't necessarily mean starting a business, but creating value, maybe for yourself, maybe for others, is something that everyone can benefit from. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, we'll put some information in the show notes actually about the module if you want to investigate whether that be something you'd like to do as an elective, or you can ask one of the Inspire members of staff at the end of this session. Thank you very much. Galina, if you could give us a piece of advice for current students who maybe aren't sure what path they want to take following graduation, what would that be? Dealing with that idea of uncertainty.
All right. I think it's quite a tough one because dealing with the choice, as always, it's such a hard situation. But I think the more of information you have, the easier it is to decide what is best for you. So I would say use as many resources as are out there available for you. So it can be talk to your friends who are studying different things or studying the same thing as you are. Talk to recent graduates, talk to people who already been working in the industry for years, because you want to understand, if you choose something, what you'll be dealing with in your career. I think it's very important to also get access not to just the glorified part of your career, but also be prepared to all the caveats and all the challenges that you can face, and based on that I think you can make the most informed decision. And I think it's also completely fine to use social media. Just go on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn is super useful. You don't have to be a professional and already work to go on LinkedIn and see the news, career updates, but it's also, I think, very important to have extent of scrutiny, because you don't want to just take the best things and hope for the best things. You also have to be prepared for the actual reality. So yeah, I think I would sum up this as just learn as much as you can before you actually make this decision, so your decision is the most informed one.
That's extremely useful, definitely. I think that's something that people should consider when they're trying to come up with. It's a funny thing at the start of your career to think about making decisions that might affect your entire career, but then there is always room to change and to move as you go along. So if you can gather the best information you have at that point in time, you're never going to go wrong, because things can change again in the future. That's what I'm taking from what you said. It's been really great to have these kind of longer pieces of information and advice and tips that you have. Even better, I think now we're going to dive into just some really quick responses of a few questions we've had given through our social media. So really anyone can answer this question. If you think you've got a good quick answer, just dive in. One thing to ditch on a CV right now.
M dash.
Okay.
Even if we're using it properly, people are going to assume it's coming from ChatGPT. Get rid of the M dash. It's not worth the risk.
Gone. One phrase to drop in an interview that signals confidence.
Can you repeat the question? Genuinely, I think if you have the if you don't understand it, or rephrase it.
Okay. I thought you were asking me to.
No, I said it with such confidence. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Looking back at your own early career, anybody, what's one lesson you wish you'd learned sooner?
There's nothing I would do differently at any point, because every decision I've made led me to where I am now, and I'm very happy with where I am, and I've tried to maintain that as my perspective from day dot, because every experience, failure or success, is a learning experience, and that comparison is a thief of joy. What good comes from torturing yourself with another version of yourself that has a Bugatti or is wearing a 50 grand watch? Like that, there's no benefit to it. So I wouldn't go back and change anything.
Brilliant. Some questions we've had coming in from our online forum. What skill do you think will be the most valuable for your career over the next 5 years?
I think the ability to be able to do your own research and adapt how you go about researching things.
Okay.
I know that seems like a very open answer, but nobody knows the answers to the questions that we're all going to have to be answering in 6 months, let alone in 5 years. And so being assertive and creative in how you go about finding information and pushing the envelope, I think, is important.
Okay, and pushing the envelope. How do you access opportunities you are given? So how do you decide what to say yes to and what to say no to?
Can I take on this?
Mhm.
So I think it's nice to create some structure, create a table, or use any software which you find convenient, and just write down all the opportunities you have and create some criteria, what matters to use the most, and then you can just sort it, like in Excel, for example, optimize it.
Okay, and that enables you to, I guess, take some of the emotion out of it as well.
Yeah, and just actually think about each opportunity and what's the best criteria for you.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a brilliant way to go about it.
Can I add something to that?
Go for it.
Also, just be aware of where other people's opinions are influencing you and decide whether or not that's something you want to listen to. I think a lot of us, we think other people will have a strong opinion on things, and actually when we drill down into it, they don't. And it is our life. But otherwise, yeah, I would do exactly and support students to do exactly what you've just said you do, Gleena.
Perfect. Should I start applying for jobs now or after my MBA?
When do you finish your MBA?
I don't know. I don't know who asked the question. So the person who asked the question must be studying for an MBA, and they want to know, do they make a start applying for jobs now, or do they wait until they've graduated?
I think in general, if we're talking about waiting to apply for a job versus not waiting to apply for a job, so taking the MBA out of the equation, I think that there's a nuanced answer along the lines of, you don't want to go sell yourself to the nth degree and then they love you, they want you, but they need you now. And then you've put yourself in a position you otherwise wouldn't be in, where you either have set them up and then let them down, and therefore they're less likely to take you when you actually want to be taken. Or you're also possibly not the finished article, or more so the finished article that you would be at the end of the MBA. So you may as well put yourself in a position where you're applying when you know you are the best version of yourself at that moment in time. So I would be cautious and conscious of what your next steps are, but I wouldn't pull the trigger on it yet, would be my answer.
If you're doing your MBA at Strathclyde, a big component of the Strathclyde MBA is self-reflection. And this goes back to what we were talking about, knowing yourself, knowing what you value. So you may be applying to the wrong job. We've had people finishing their MBAs and realizing that the career trajectory they wanted to go down was wrong. In fact, some quit their job that they were meant to go back to, because they realized that the value they wanted to create for themselves lay elsewhere. And the journey is not completed until you've done your project for the MBA. So wait until your project, not because you are a better chance of finding a job, but because you will know what job aligns with your values more.
Can I add on to that? Because I everything that everyone said is absolutely true. And I typically see it's, 2 to 3 months tends to be a good lead time. So you can start looking before you've finished, but 2 to 3 months maybe. But I think also you can be researching what's out there way beforehand, so that when you come to be able to apply, you know how often that job with that company or that sort of company comes up, and you've seen the similar job descriptions with other organisations in the past. So, I know for myself, when I was doing my postgraduate, I kept an eye on all the jobs boards I then went on to use, and I saw, only 6 jobs that I want as my long term came up in that year. Maybe my first job, I'm going to need to broaden my horizons on what I'm looking for. So I think be doing that research while you're doing the MBA, but yeah, don't pull the trigger until you're able to actually deliver on it.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Quickly. And many, I think of getting a job as firing off a CV and application. Your job your job search process starts much earlier, and it starts with you networking and mingling with just, in the circles where you eventually want to get the job. And that is about the potential employer knowing who you are, but also you knowing how the employer works, beyond the glossy facade of the web page. So you know what you're buying into, and they know what you're buying into. And that's usually a better, more sustainable job search, I would say.
Yeah, it was such a good point that you don't have to actually apply, but you can start preparing. Because what if the first job you apply for is your dream job, but you've never had an interview experience? I think it's very important to work through the interview, prepare potential questions, and just talk to your friends or to yourself. So the work you're applying for right after the graduation, you're the most prepared.
I always like to end by asking people if there's anything they would have liked to have said to this audience of people who are trying to figure out the future, what it's going to take to get to the success that they're looking for. Is there anything you would have liked to say, any bits of knowledge that you think are really important that we've not enabled you to say by asking the right question?
There's a difference between having an objective and having values. Having that set definitive destination of what that thing is that you want to do, you can become a slave to that thing, rather than having that set value image of the direction that you want to go. This is a conversation that normally gets really enthusiastic when I'm having it with students, because the reference that I normally give is Rory McIlroy finally completing the Grand Slam and then immediately suffering in all of his practice sessions, missing cuts they would never miss before, and just not being that same golfer that he was when he just reached the pinnacle of his career. And it was because he set himself that life objective of having the Grand Slam. And as soon as you achieve something to your objective, that it can actually decelerate, and you actually find that across different sectors, not just sport. You see it in businesses, you see it in football when a team goes 2-0 up and then they're trying to protect the lead. They're no longer playing the football they were before, and then all of a sudden they start conceding and misplacing passes. I think having that values, that vision, that thing that you're guided by and you're going in that general direction of is way more beneficial than having that set destination image of who you're going to be in that job you're going to have in that car you're going to drive.
I have never thought of it like that. I think a lot of times people go, make a goal that you can see coming and that's achievable and look at it every day and aim for that thing. But what you're saying is actually much bigger than that. If you know the kind of person you want to be, or you know the values you're aiming for, when you reach that objective, because you will, or you might find that you needed a different objective all along, what are you going to do next? That's so very valuable.
It takes a lot of time and effort to realise what those values are. And so don't think that you're just going to wake up one morning and everybody wakes up on their 25th birthday or whatever it is and just knows. But I think, that takes work. So the level of work you're putting into going, I need this extra certification, or I need to get the best mark ever. How much am I investing in knowing myself? Because you need to know yourself before you know what is going to suit you out there in the big bad world. And I think it does take effort. It's not effortless for most of us.
I think it was a conversation I had with like a first or a second year student around value creation that asked me the question of, have you achieved what you set out to achieve when you were my age? And I had to give the honest answer of, I don't want what I wanted when I was your age anymore. Like that red motorcycle Ferrari life is not the fulfilling life that Thomas, who I am now, but I also don't know what I will really want to achieve when I'm 60 either. So I know my values, that's more important.
Please. If I can say something on the same wavelength, and Galina said something on that earlier, it's about make your own definition of success for you. All too often we see graduates who are influenced by society, by others around them, by parents on what is the right career trajectory. And there isn't such a thing because, as you said, you may be, the job may love you, but you may not love the job. So find somewhere where there is a mutual love, and that's the only way to be happy.
And that's it for this episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button on whichever platform you're listening to us. We'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review or a rating, as this helps other viewers to find us.